It's time for the Lowell Green Show, originating live on blasttheradio.com. Ask the smart speaker to play Blast the Radio. Live video available on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. The number to call or text is 613-413-2217. And now, telling it like it is, here's Lowell Green.
Just want to remind everyone once again that we welcome your calls, phone calls, texts, email, however, with any topic that you think we should be discussing. If there's something else, and this is beginning to happen, I'm glad to see it. Some people are responding that they would like to talk about some other issues, so let's do it. As a matter of fact, my main topic today is one that a couple of callers suggested, and that is the CBC. Should the CBC, in light of the fact that very clearly they're in a conflict of interest, I mean, O'Toole has promised on more than one occasion, if the Conservatives are elected, he's going to greatly reduce the funding, taxpayer funding, to the CBC, which very clearly places the CBC in a conflict of interest, making unbiased reporting for political events, it seems to me, impossible. I mean, it very clearly it's biased, and this is one of the reasons. So that's a little bit later in the show. I'm going to ask that question, whether you think, in your opinion, the CBC radio and television should be allowed to broadcast anything, any political news or commentary, in light of the fact that there very clearly is a conflict of interest. But before we get into that topic, okay, let me tell you a little story about my old friend Gord Atkinson, or Gord A, as we all affectionately called him. The plaudits continued to pour in, paying tribute to Gord, who died during the weekend, as I'm sure you're aware of by now, at the age of 94. Well-deserved praise, I might add. Gord A was a radio pioneer, a visionary in many ways, played a major role in launching and assisting the careers of several people who went on to become big stars. A couple of cases still stars today in Vegas and elsewhere. Gord A. Is a guy, I don't think that there's ever been anybody quite like him before, and I doubt that there ever will be again. But back a few years, let me tell you the story. Back a few years, Gord and I, along with a couple of other Ottawa business people, decided that we would take over the CBC AM radio station. The CBC had decided to shut down its AM frequency in Ottawa. So there it was sitting there, a whole frequency on a radio station, including all of the equipment. And it was available for, as I recall, peanuts. I forget the exact amount, but it wasn't very much money. The real money would have been in the running of the station. But Gord A and I and a couple of others decided, hey, let's take over that AM radio station. We'll run it, and we'll do a talk show. I would do a talk show, and Gord would do interviews and so forth. It might have been successful. Who knows? But where are we going to get the funding? I didn't have that kind of money, nor did Gord. So Gord said, you know what? My good friend Rich Little, he's got lots of money. He'll do the funding. And I said, well, okay, let's see if he's interested. And apparently he was. Gord gave him a call. Gord was very close friends with Rich for many, many years. And so one day, lo and behold, Rich Little arrives in Ottawa. And we take him down to the transmitter site. I think it was out near Manotick. It was out in a field, cattle surrounding and so forth. The transmitter site with all of the big poles outside and so forth. So we take Rich Little inside to show him. And I mean, this is the equipment. I mean, it's all technical. There's flashing lights and buzzing. John, you would have far more idea of exactly what kind of equipment would be there, the transmitter site.
Yep.
But so we're trying to explain to Rich Little, this is the transmitter site and so forth. I can see that Rich has no interest in this whatsoever. It's just, I mean, his eyes are glazing over as Gord tries to explain to him, this is this and this is that. Rich has no interest in this. Gord's doing his best to enthuse Rich Little, but Rich is not. He's not interested in this. This technical stuff doesn't interest Rich Little in the least. It didn't interest me very much, to be honest with you.
I love it. I love it.
But at any rate, Rich has no interest until He spots something on the ground. Rich Little bends down, picks it up. It's a toonie. Rich says, "What the hell's this?" And I said, "It's a toonie." He said, "What's a toonie?" I said, "It's $2, $2 Canadian. You're kidding." I said, "No." I said, "That's a toonie. You can spend that for $2. Yeah. And a store will take that? Yeah. Oh my God, we don't have anything like that in the States. Geez, my buddies down in Vegas will really be interested in seeing this." And then he takes the toonie and he whacks it. He's trying to push the. He says, "Does this thing fall apart?" And he's trying to push the center out. Okay, like a lot of us did in the early days. Of course, it's not coming out. He whacks it 2 or 3 times on a piece of the equipment there. Nothing happens. So we finally got him interested in the toonie. He says, "Can I take this?" I said, "Sure." "You found it on the floor there?" So he puts it in his pocket. I can't wait to show this to my buddies in Vegas. So that was so much for the equipment. So we walk outside, and this is in a farmer's field. This building is in a bit of a farmer's field. And there's a fence, and there's a whole herd of cattle, maybe 10, 15 cattle. Rich is really excited about these cattle. He bends down, picks up a big handful of grass, and he walks over to the fence, and he's all enthused about these cows. Of course, they all come running over to take the grass out of his hand, right? So I turned to Gord. I remember saying, Gord Atkinson, I said, Gord, I don't think Rich is really interested in a radio station. Obviously, he's far more interested in toonies and cows. So Gord kind of laughed. He said, no. He said, that's just Rich. That's just Rich. He said, he'll don't worry. He'll come through with the funding. Well, in the end, Rich Little didn't come through with the funding, thank God. And we never did get the station. We had a very good friend. I had a very good friend who was an accountant. Went down to Vegas and spent a couple of days with Rich going over his books. And he came back to me and said, "Lowell, there's no way that Rich Little is going to fund anything." I said, "Why?" "Well," he said, "he just paid out a bundle of money to a just divorced wife." He said, he said he's lucky he's got the toonie. So that's so that was the end of that. But my understanding is, Gord, talked with Rich almost every day, and Gord told me a little bit later that his buddies, Rich's buddies in Vegas, were really, really interested in this toonie. He showed it around, and apparently, with a couple of times he came back to Ottawa, and he still had the toonie in his pocket. He was so fascinated with this. So that's my little story about Gordy, and Gord is a great guy, and his good friend Rich Little, believe me. Now, on another issue, the CBC. What is your view here? In light of the fact that CBC Radio and Television has a major conflict of interest, as I stated, O'Toole has promised on more than one occasion that if elected, he will greatly reduce taxpayer funding. Right now, CBC gets about $1.4 billion or something of taxpayers' money every year. O'Toole says no way. He's going to cut it way back. Very clearly, this leads to a conflict of interest. I mean, people in the CBC executives know that if the Conservatives are elected, there's a very good chance that some of them, maybe all of them, are going to lose their jobs, that funding is going to be cut way back. The CBC will have to change its programming drastically. And very clearly, there's a conflict of interest, which, in my opinion, makes this question fair. It's a fair question. I'm in favor of free speech and all of that, but should the CBC, with an obvious conflict of interest, be allowed to broadcast political news and political commentary? I mean, the CBC has always been left-wing. We all know that. There's always been at least a hint of a bias there. But, I mean, it's very blatant now, and you can understand why. I mean, if you're an employee of the CBC and you got a real nice fat cat job, as most of them do, making far more money than I ever made, or you, John, in broadcasting, with pensions and all the rest of it, you don't want to lose your job. And so you're going to do everything you can, as subtly as you can, maybe, and in discouraging people from voting for the Conservative. That's common sense. But with that in mind, should they be allowed to do this? At the very least, should they be allowed to broadcast political commentary and political news during an election campaign? I think at the very least, it begs that question. I mean, there are many things that the CBC can and should be doing. Football, baseball, hockey, curling, golf. They do a great job. You know, Schitt's Creek, corner grocery, corner gas, et cetera, that kind of thing, showing Canada, at least their vision of Canada to Canadians. And news that's non-political, I don't have a problem with that. But boy, oh boy, when the CBC gets into political news and political commentary, it just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Because I know that there's bias. There's a conflict of interest. What's your feeling, folks? Should the CBC, both radio and television, be compelled to broadcast only non-political programs? As I say, bring us hockey, bring us baseball, curling, golf. Bring on shows like Corner Gas, Schitt's Creek, etc., but no political news, no political commentary. Your view of that? Yes, John, we've got some comments here.
Yep, a couple of comments already. By the way, we'd love your calls as well. We're at 613-413-2217. You can go to blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green for all of our other contact links. Text says, Lowell, if the CBC is going to ever be cut back, I wonder if they'll be able to develop and produce kids shows. Friendly Giant was the best kids show I ever watched. Joshua, on a different subject, is wondering if Rich Little has a Lowell Green impression.
Yes, he did.
Really?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, Rich Little, I was at, Rich Little performed one time. I think it was the Capitol Theater, the old Capitol Theater on Bank Street. Big crowd. And at one point, I forget exactly what happened, but Rich Little got a really good laugh when he was saying something, and somebody said something, somebody, I guess, said something in the audience. He says, "You don't say anything like that. I've got Lowell Green as my lawyer," and it brought down the house.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I met Rich, and Rich is a good guy, very talented guy, but very, I asked Rich one time, I said, Rich, there are probably, at the time, and his name escapes me now, some of the old timers may remember, but there was a man in town. He was a member of the press gallery.
Yep.
And he actually did better impressions, I believe, than Rich Little. And I asked Rich one time, I said, now let me ask you this, Rich. I said, is it talent or is it just absolute determination? He said, Lowell, you got to have some talent. But he said, if you don't have determination, you don't make it in Vegas. You don't make it in Hollywood. It's determination. And by the way, this is an aside on this, John. I had one of the Senators' coaches. Oh, my God, his name escapes me now. One of the early coaches, and I had him on. And I asked him a similar question. I said, Coach, what's more important in a professional hockey player? Is it skill or is it determination and a willingness to work? He said it's about 20% skill and about 80% determination. He said only those that really, really are determined, have this goal, are going to make it to the NHL, that ever make it. He said unless you have that, you simply don't make it. So I thought it was a very good lesson from both of them. Shields. Talking about lessons, okay? Here comes another really good segue here, John. You like these segues?
I love these segues.
Shields, right now, in the middle of a major sale. They don't have sales very often at Shields up there in Pakenham. They don't really need to because their prices are so reasonable anyway. But they understand they're trying to make more of inroads into the city of Ottawa now. They've been doing very, very well for many years throughout the valley, all the way from Barry's Bay right down through the Cornwall. And now they're beginning to make inroads in Ottawa, and they're very pleased. So in order to sort of speed that along, they have lowered their prices on many of the appliances. If you go to Shields, SCHEELS.ca, you will see all of the appliances listed there, pictures, prices, and the sale prices. And the big thing, or one of the big things about Shields, of course, is it's all in stock. You don't have to wait. Don't sign up with a big box store and ship your money off to China, for God's sake. China's got lots of our money. They don't need your money. keep the money local. And if you deal with Shields, in all probability, exactly what you want will be delivered to your door within a few days, not a few weeks. Shields.ca. Yes, John, more text coming in here.
Yep, and just a reminder, our number is 613-413-2217. We'd love some calls. Regarding the CBC, Anthony says all conservative leaders always pledge to reduce funding to the CBC, though. Peter says conservatives have been talking about doing something with the CBC since Mulroney. Nothing really happens. Gut the damn thing. Ann says CBC bias and print media with their bailouts. And Nina adds, all news media needs to broadcast the news in a neutral and unbiased manner, and they should be funded by sponsors, which is
but that's
the
not
government.
that's not dealing with my issue here. Okay, my question is this. Okay, I mean, I'm not denying or disagreeing with anything that's been said so far, but please address the question. In your opinion, should the CBC at the very least be prohibited from broadcasting political news and political commentary? At the very least, should it be prevented from broadcasting political news and commentary during a federal election? That's the question, and I would really appreciate it if you'd give me some thoughts on that. I know all of we're already aware of the biases. We're aware of the conservative. I happen to believe that, in fact, because O'Toole has been very specific exactly what he plans to do here, the amount, what he's going to do, etc. It's rather involved, but I have no question that he's going to do that, and I also have no question in my mind that the CBC believes he's going to do that, and that's really what's germane here. So my question then is, please, okay, do you think that the CBC should stop broadcasting political news and political commentary in light of an obvious conflict of interest? Should they stop at least during federal elections? What's your view on that? Yes, John.
Lisa on Facebook says, yes, they should not be allowed to show their political bias. We have a text at 613-413-2217 from Barry. Barry says, Lowell, I think that too many news reporters have no class or decorum when asking questions of politicians and show their political preferences the way they question or talk to politicians. And I think this can influence the public, which is not right.
That's not my question, though.
No, I know.
Sometimes it's really hard for people to address their mind, and we will move on if this doesn't interest you, but I would be really interested. I mean, this is a real problem. How can anybody deny there's a conflict of interest? So in light of that, wrap your mind around the question. Should they be prohibited? Because the federal government could very well stop it. And if the public put the pressure on, the CBC might have to do that. Stop broadcasting political news and commentary at the very least during a federal election. That's my question. Yes, John, any more calls coming in? No?
Yep, Peter says, to answer Lowell's question, it should be banned during elections, perhaps 30 days prior to and during.
That's fair.
Ann says, should, but it will never happen. And Debbie asked, do you remember the first election when Justin Trudeau got in? There was a debate on TV, and in the run-up to the program, Peter Mansbridge, who I used to respect, made a comment comparing Trudeau and Harper. And among the comments was that on the education front, they were both basically college dropouts, forgetting Trudeau dropped out and Harper stopped attending accounting classes and went on to get a PhD in finance.
Yeah, I mean, that's just an example of the kind of bias that's there. We all know the bias. It's very obvious. But I think that in light of this, I think it presents a real fundamental problem for the Canadian population. How can we be properly informed if the state broadcaster, one of the major methods that we have of obtaining information, has a very clear and stated bias? I just, people are worried about elections that aren't fair, foreign interference, et cetera, et cetera. That was a big issue with Donald Trump. But it seems to me that there's another kind of interference going on here, and that is reporting from a very clearly biased organization. Yes, John.
It's a little slow on Facebook, but nonetheless, we do have a couple of comments. Nina says, yes, the CBC should be prohibited from broadcasting. I don't think she means from broadcasting, but during an election.
Yeah.
I'll fill in.
I'm talking about political news and commentary.
Yeah, I'll fill
We're going to move on. We're not getting a response on this topic.
No, it's pretty quiet.
I want to move on.
All right.
Talking about broadcast bias, I don't know about you, but I am getting sick and tired of most of the criticism being leveled at Doug Ford and other premiers over the distribution of vaccines. It's unbelievable what's happening here. You talk about unfairness. The problem is that everybody, every group believes that they should be the first ones to receive the shots. No one objected, or very few objected, when the first people who got the shots were long-term care residents. Very few people objected to that. But soon after that was done, the bickering and complaints started. Frontline workers should be the first to receive it, was the argument from many. And there's legitimacy to that. Then there was the cry, remember this, the teachers should get it. Remember that? And then retail workers, there was a cry for that. Then truckers demanded, they said they should be getting it. Today, it's really political now. It's really dirty political. Because now the cry from the left is that racialized groups should get preferential treatment. Racialized groups, they say they have more incidents, et cetera, et cetera. So now the cry is that. And of course, all of these groups, all of these individuals who are not first or have to wait, they're mad. And they're not mad at Trudeau. They're mad at Doug Ford because Doug Ford's the guy who's got to decide where this goes. And, at first the decision was that it would be, long-term care, no problem. Then it was older people. And there was a little bit of objection to that. But then after that, the anger was really built because everybody else, we should be first. The problem is, folks, look, if we had as many vaccinations as Trudeau said we did or promised, like in the tens of millions, there would not be a problem. Everybody would be able to get vaccinated. We're now almost 5 months into this. By now, just as in the UK and largely in the United States, everybody pretty well that wanted a vaccination would have it. All the lockdowns would be over, and the pandemic would be declared over, as it is in the UK now. Israel has just declared the pandemic absolutely over. No more masks in Israel, and it's much the same in the UK, and shortly is going to be that in the United States. So, but the problem is that poor old Doug Ford's, he's being rationed. Trudeau is rationing Doug Ford and all of the premiers, because Jason Kenney, it's interesting to see that the ones who are getting most of the criticism are the conservative premiers, Doug Ford and Jason Kenney. They're the two prominent conservative, and they're the ones getting most of the flack. But they've got to deal with limited supply. They can't, if they had unlimited supplies, if their supply was infinite, then they could give everybody, you want a vaccine? Good, that's it, here it is. But mass vaccination, we can't do that. We don't have the vaccines. Here we are almost 5 months into it, and still, as I reported before, about 70% of Canada's population doesn't even have the first vaccine. Less than 3% are fully vaccinated. That's not Doug Ford's problem. That's not his fault. It's his problem, but it's not his fault. It's not the premier's fault. We don't have the vaccines. And now look at the decision. Decision was made, I don't know, by somebody, not Doug Ford, that they were going to lower the age of people who could get the AZ vaccine at the pharmacies. The only problem is the pharmacies don't have enough vaccines to even vaccinate people who are 40 plus. So somebody, not Doug Ford, not Jason Kenney, not the premiers, made a decision, we're going to lower the age to 30. But they don't have the vaccines to do it. As a matter of fact, they're now saying that throughout all of Ontario, and I suspect all of Canada, they're going to be out of the AZ vaccines in the next couple of days. And there are tens of thousands of people signed up to get the vaccination, and there are no vaccines. But who's going to get hell for that? It'll be Doug Ford. It'll be Jason Kenney. It'll be the premiers who'll get the hell for that, because they're the one. That people don't seem to realize that Doug Ford cannot dole out vaccines he does not have. And of course, the story has always been, you've got millions of these in a freezer someplace. They don't. That's been proven time and time again. They don't. And so, but the poor old Doug Ford, he's the guy that's getting it. It's his fault. He is not the one who is rationing vaccines. It is Justin Trudeau. And I have another question. I've raised this before. Many of the vaccines that we do have now were not vaccines that Justin Trudeau talked about, months ago. that he had ordered. They have, what, 330,000, I think, from COVAX, which is supposed to go to third world nations. We got from them. That isn't something that Trudeau promised back in March. We've got a bunch, apparently, AZ coming in from the United States. So where are all of these vaccines that Trudeau said he had ordered and paid $8 billion for? Why is nobody else questioning, or very few people questioning this? For the life of me, I don't understand what's going on. People just don't. They're mad at Doug Ford because he's the guy who's doling it out. He gets it from Trudeau, but he can only dole out what Trudeau gives him. And if Trudeau doesn't give it to him, nothing he can do. And then not only that, but I also noticed that if he complains about the fact that there are no vaccines, or as he's doing now, complaining about the fact that there's still airplanes arriving here from God knows where with all sorts of COVID passengers, that now the media is beginning to complain about him making a political issue out of this. You know, we should get along. How the hell are you going to get along with Trudeau, who claims, oh, well, I've given you all sorts of vaccines. You're just storing these away in a freezer someplace. And when it's a damn blatant, bloody lie, how is Ford supposed to get along with that? John, yes, back to you.
A text, 613-413-2217. Doug Ford is not the issue. The photogenic muppet we have running our country is the issue. The vaccine shortage/delay starts and stops with Trudeau. That is Sean. Thank you, Sean. Lisa said, Trudeau needs Ford to shift the blame. He's an easy target. My liberal Facebook friends are always blaming Ford. Never would they blame their curly Q hero, Trudeau. Vanda says, we need Lowell to do a show regarding the promise of paid placement for personal support worker students. He stated for some 2,200 currently enrolled students. Well, my placement starts June 22nd, and nothing has been stated about this. Arthur says, I think some of the vaccines due to come to Canada will end up going to India. And says the only way the premiers are going to turn the page on Trudeau is to make sure that every damn vaccine gets into an arm faster than he can deliver it. And Peter says Trudeau is to blame for not having inventory. Looney stops at his desk, not the fault of Ford. And Robert chimes in, Ford and the premiers are being targeted by the big red liberal machine and the complying media. The middle finger should be pointed directly at Trudeau. Some of the comments coming in today.
Now, what's really interesting, particularly coming out of Toronto, are all of these claims that it's the racialized communities that now shade preferential treatment. And if there's science to back that up, I don't have a problem with that. But, I mean, these increasingly, it's just becoming politicized. Look, if the racialized communities get it, then others can't. That's what seems to be missing in the argument of many of these people. If you give it to this group and you have a limited supply, then the other group can't get it. But the other group is mad. You know, so you give it to the racialized community, which the big thing now from the left wing, give it to the racialized communities. Meantime, we have all sorts of frontline workers who've only had one shot and are coming down. I mean, we all know the Heart Institute, for example, begging for the second shot because some 14 or 15 of their staff became ill even after getting the first shot. The whole thing, but once again, here is Trudeau skating through it all, right? He skates through because he's sort of removed. He's the guy he shipped it, but it's Ford, it's Kenny, it's the other premiers. They're the ones who've got to dole it out. So they're the guys in the front line. They're the guys that get it up to you know what, where. Centennial Glass, once again, dealing with a local company. Been in business a long, long time in this community, doing great work. And one of the things, too, that I don't think I talk enough about are the prices at Centennial Glass. They pride themselves on really, really keeping prices low. They do a lot of work for big commercial, big apartment buildings, supply all of the windows, doors, etc., restaurants. But what they really enjoy are ordinary homeowners. Windows, doors, framed mirrors. They love doing customized glass furniture. They do a great job. If you have an idea that you'd like some glass furniture or partly glass, give them a call at Centennial Glass. They'll come up with the ideas, the designs. They'll quote you a price. And one thing about Centennial, they quote you a price, they'll stick to it. They're honest, good people. Centennial Glass, Ottawa and Renfrew. All right. Thank you all, folks. I'm sorry we didn't get more comment concerning the CBC, but that's fine. Obviously, the whole issue of vaccines is still uppermost in most people's minds, and rightly so, folks. I don't know if you believe in prayer or not. our hearts just go out to what's happening in India. It is just absolutely dreadful. And I just thank the common sense of the average Canadian that we, for the most part, paid attention to the rules, and it's not happening in Canada. It's bad what's happening here, but nowhere near what is happening in India. And we can thank ourselves on that, because it's sure not the vaccines that are keeping it away. It's that we did what we're supposed to, and we've still got to continue. I repeat, folks, 70% of us still have not had a single shot yet. For God's sake, wear the mask. You know what? The next time someone says don't wear a mask, just walk away from them. They're idiots. They're people who want to harm you. Anybody who tells you not to wear a mask or not to distance yourself, they want to harm you. They want to hurt you. They want to see you come down with a very serious illness. Don't listen to them. Walk away from them. They're not your friends. Thank you. We'll be back.
Lowell Green, live on blasttheradio.com. Show info and links at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Subscribe to the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and more. Or ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green podcast. Join us live, weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on blasttheradio.com.